Hello everyone, welcome to our second half of the discussion of Chapter 6, Miscellaneous Itemized Deductions. We left off with this list of other business expenses and talking about uniforms and safety equipment, things that you have to have in order to be able to work on the job. While the slide says steel-toed shoes, that probably is not a situation, actually, if you look carefully at this tax code, that would be allowed as a deduction because they can be worn for other situations. But that's the kind of stuff that you're talking about, is things that are specifically for the job. Employee physicals, technically, even though it's a medical expense, it should be deducted as miscellaneous itemized deduction rather than as a medical expense. Education. This is an area where if you get some continuing education, the two pieces that it can't do is prepare you to meet the minimum education requirements or qualify for a new trade or business. So if you're a real estate agent, you take classes in accounting, that's not going to do it because you're actually looking for a new job. Similar to the job hunting expenses. But then if those two don't disqualify you, then you're going to maintain or improve your skills, or it's required by law to keep their status. For instance, continuing professional education for a CPA or a lawyer or something like that, or even doctors. They have to take certain things by law. So those would be deductible here. If they were an employee, they had to do these things and their employer did not reimburse them for that. So it can include tuition, books. That's the typical things for a regular student, but you would also deduct transportation, meals if you have to go out of town to do so, and lodging if you need to go away to get this education. However, what they do, where they put the limit is you can't just say, oh, I need to become a travel agent, therefore I need to travel a lot, and therefore that making that a deductible education expense. No, sorry, that's not going to fly. So, employment searches, comparable job or job in their same line. Again, the key is you can't be looking for a new job. So Elsa is currently employed as a consultant. She spends thousands in pursuit of a new consulting job. Her efforts are unsuccessful. Doesn't matter if she's unsuccessful. She can deduct that as an employee business expense. English teacher, but he's looking for a job as a journal editor. His efforts are successful. Okay, that's not going to work because it's not in his current line of business, even though it's successful. So it's not a matter of success or not. It's a matter about as a new job or not, in terms of a new line of business or a new industry. So office in the home. We'll look at this in more detail when we get to our self-employment section, but employees can deduct expenses related to the business use of their home. This is a pretty high threshold. It has to be used exclusively for the principal place of business, or a place to meet and deal with patients, clients, or customers. This is pretty rare, if you think about it, for an employee to have this situation, but there are some work-from-home employees that have that idea that this is where they do most of the work. The other thing that it must be is for the convenience of the employer. So the employer has to have something in the contract or your agreement with them that says you have to have a home office so that you can take care of certain things at home. That's part of the reason we're hiring you is because you have that. So that is fairly rare. So it's not just a matter of having a home office because you'd like to have it, because you like to take home work or get off early or something. This is for the convenience of the employer. all of these deductions, all of these miscellaneous items, or at least the employee business expenses all go on Form 2106. This is illustrated here. You can see the form 2017. At the top is where we separate the regular expenses from our meals, because meals are 50% reduced. Other expenses in column A, meals and entertainment in column B. So all the things that we've talked about that constitute employee business expenses all go here. So vehicles here, you multiply it by the standard rate or the actual mileage. If you use the actual mileage, you flip the form over, and you'll figure out the miles and how far you went for business and so forth, and answer some questions. The rest of this is for the actual costs, but the top we use where we calculate the per diem or the per mile amount. So the calculation is really easy. You just take the number of miles, multiply by the rate for the year, 53.5 for 2017. Actual cost far more complicated. Other work-related things that are don't easily calculated that you're going to have to keep track of: business, parking, tolls, things like that. Any other talked about earlier. And then the total cost of meals and entertainment. Then we subtract the reimbursement we got from employer. Okay. Do not include, and this is the thing to remember, anything that is actually put on your W-2. So an unaccountable, non-accountable plan would be on your W-2, so it would not go here. If it was an accountable plan, you had to show your receipts and then got reimbursed, but it wasn't for all of it, then it would go here, and so you'd still subtract how much you got reimbursed and get the remainder would be what comes down here below, still two columns, to get your deduction. The 50% reduction is applied only to column B, where the meals and entertainment, and then they are added up and moved to Schedule A with any other miscellaneous deductions. All right, all of them together have to be over 2% of your AGI or they don't count. So some other ones that are not what we would refer to as employee business expenses: tax preparation fees, that's paying us to do their taxes. Investment related expenses, like the journal subscriptions to help you pick stocks, things like that. And then other costs, including hobby expenses, expenses to collect your income. For instance, if you paid an attorney to go after your ex-spouse to pay your child support or alimony, those could go here. All right, so all of these together, figure out the 2% floor and then take the amount by which it exceeds it. A little bit about hobbies. There's some factors here that determine whether a business is your activity is a hobby or a business. If it's a business, you can have a loss, meaning you can have more expenses than income. If it's a hobby, you cannot. So what happens with a hobby, if it doesn't rise to the level of a business, if it doesn't fit these factors, it doesn't have to hit all of the factors, it just has to hit enough of them to convince somebody that you're doing it for profit. If it's a hobby, then you report the income as other income on the 1040, and you report the expenses for it as a miscellaneous itemized deduction, which means you only get to use them if you are over 2% of AGI and if you itemize. So that's the problem with hobbies. Now, our last thing here is our miscellaneous deductions that are not subject to 2% floor. Favorite one here, the one that will come up most often, is gambling losses. They're limited in a different way. They're limited to the amount of your winnings. All right. Some other things that don't come up near as much as the gambling losses. So example for gambling losses, lost $7,500 at the racetrack, won $3,000 playing poker. Notice it's all gambling. It doesn't have to be in any, you don't have to mash up any particular type of game or anything like that. So the $3,000 goes in other income, kind of like a hobby on Form 1040, and then you deduct your gambling losses right here on the Schedule A, right down there. So that's where you would put those gambling losses. And again, they are only deductible if you itemize. So if your standard deductions higher than your itemized deductions, then those losses aren't going to do you any good, but you still have to report the income. So just a quick review of things that are not deductible. Notice here at the bottom, personal living expenses are not deductible. And in fact, nothing is deductible unless specifically mentioned in the tax code. And these are things that are not, or are in some cases specifically precluded from being deducted, like political contributions are specifically mentioned as not deductible. Gambling losses in excess of gambling is specifically mentioned. Illegal bribes and kickbacks specifically mentioned. So those are the kinds of things that are not deductible. Therefore, you would not see them on someone's return.